There is a hard truth most people don't want to hear. The world is not designed to be gentle with you. It doesn't slow down when you're tired. It doesn't soften its blows when you're overwhelmed. And it doesn't care how hard you tried yesterday. Life breaks people quietly, not all at once, but piece by piece. It breaks you through disappointment that never gets resolved, through effort that goes unnoticed, through pressure that doesn't let up, through days where you keep showing up yet nothing seems to change. And over time something inside you starts to crack. You become more reactive, more defensive, more exhausted. Not because you are weak, but because no one ever taught you how to endure without losing yourself. Most people grow up believing strength means being optimistic, staying positive, hoping things will work out. But hope alone doesn't make you resilient. And positivity alone won't stop the world from wearing you down. What actually determines whether life breaks you is not what happens to you. It's what you become in response. Some people harden in the wrong way. They become bitter, closed off, angry at the world. Others collapse inward. They doubt themselves, lower their standards, slowly accept a smaller life than they once imagined. And then there are a few quiet, disciplined, rarely noticed, who don't let life break them at all. Not because they avoid pain, but because they learn how to carry it. They build emotional control when things feel unfair. They develop discipline when motivation disappears. They learn to stand alone without needing constant validation. And most importantly, they stop expecting the world to be kind. This audiobook is for you if you've ever felt worn down by life. Not in one dramatic moment, but through a long series of small disappointments that never quite healed. If you've ever felt like you're holding yourself together with effort while the world keeps asking for more. If you've ever wondered how some people stay calm, focused, and grounded while everything around them feels chaotic, this is not a video about becoming cold. And it's not about becoming ruthless toward others. It's about becoming unbreakable within yourself, about building a core that doesn't collapse under pressure, about learning how to feel deeply without reacting destructively. About creating inner structure so life can push but not destroy. Over the next hour, you're not going to hear motivational hype. You're not going to be told to believe harder or stay positive. You're going to learn how strong people actually think, how they respond to pressure, how they recover when they fall, and how they quietly build resilience while everyone else is looking for shortcuts. This is about discipline over comfort, standards over moods, and self-control over emotional chaos. Because the truth is simple. The world will test you again and again and it will not stop. So the question is no longer whether life will try to break you. The question is whether you are becoming the kind of person who cannot be broken. This message resonates with you. Don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with one person you care about, someone you know is struggling, someone who needs strength, clarity, eyes, and control. Right now so it can help them improve their life too. Chapter 1. The world breaks the unprepared. The world does not break everyone equally. It breaks the unprepared first. Not because they are weak. Not because they lack intelligence or talent, but because they walk into pressure without armor, without structure, without an inner standard strong enough to hold them steady when life starts pushing back. Most people don't realize this until it's too late. They assume life will give them time. They assume effort will always be rewarded. They assume good intentions are enough to protect them. And then reality arrives. Deadlines tighten. Expectations rise. People disappoint you. Plans fall apart. And suddenly the same optimism that once felt hopeful becomes a liability. The world doesn't announce when it's about to test you. It doesn't send a warning. It simply applies pressure slowly. Is consistently without mercy. Bills still need to be paid when you're tired. Responsibilities don't disappear when you're overwhelmed. And no one pauses their demands just because you're doing your best. This is where most people begin to crack. They weren't prepared for sustained pressure. They weren't trained to operate without reassurance. They weren't taught how to stay steady when motivation disappears. So they react, they panic, they complain, they look for shortcuts, they look for someone to blame. But the world doesn't respond to reactions. It responds to readiness. Unprepared people live on emotional impulse. When they feel good, they act. When they feel discouraged, they stop. When something doesn't go their way, they lose focus and the world exploits that weakness. Not intentionally, but inevitably. Pressure reveals structure. And when there is no structure, pressure exposes chaos. Think about it. Two people can face the same setback. One bends, recalibrates, and keeps moving. The other collapses, withdraws and starts doubting everything. The difference isn't strength, it's preparation. The prepared person doesn't expect life to be fair. They expect resistance. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. They don't wait to feel ready. They train themselves to act regardless of how they feel. Unprepared people build their lives on comfort. Prepared people build theirs on standards. Comfort tells you to rest when things get uncomfortable. Standards tell you to hold your ground when things get hard. The world doesn't break you in one dramatic moment. It breaks you through repetition, through the same stress again and again. Through the same disappointment again and again, through the same temptation to quit, lower your standards, or numb yourself. If you don't have internal rules, rules that don't change with your mood, you will eventually give in. And when you give in often enough, something dangerous happens. You start to see yourself as fragile. You begin to expect collapse. You brace for failure before it even happens. You lose trust in your ability to endure. That's how people shrink. Not because life defeated them once, but because they were never prepared to withstand it repeatedly. Preparation is not paranoia, it's realism. Prepared people accept a simple truth. Life is demanding and it will not adjust itself to your emotions. So, they adjust themselves instead. They prepare their mornings. They prepare their routines. They prepare their responses. They don't ask, how do I avoid pressure? They ask, how do I become someone pressure can't easily move? The unprepared person waits for clarity before acting. The prepared person acts to create clarity. The unprepared person hopes the storm passes quickly. The prepared person learns how to stand in the storm without losing balance. And this is critical to understand. The world respects stability, not loud confidence, not promises, not potential. Stability. When you show up consistently, when your actions don't swing wildly with your emotions, when your standards don't disappear under stress, life stops breaking you. Not because it becomes easier, but because you become harder to disrupt. Preparation doesn't mean controlling everything. It means controlling yourself. It means knowing how you operate when you're tired. Knowing what you do when things don't go your way. Knowing how you respond when no one is watching and no one is praising you. The world breaks the unprepared because they leave too much to chance. They let moods decide their effort. They let circumstances decide their discipline. They let other people's behavior decide their self-worth. Prepared people remove chance from the equation. They decide in advance who they are and how they act. They decide what is non-negotiable. They decide what does not change even on bad days. This is where unbreakability begins. Not in confidence, not in motivation, but in preparation. If you are tired of feeling overwhelmed, if you are tired of reacting instead of responding, if you are tired of being shaken by things you cannot control, the answer is not to ask the world to be gentler. The answer is to stop walking into life unprepared. Because the world will keep applying pressure. That will never change. What can change is whether you meet that pressure with fragility or with structure. And the moment you choose preparation over comfort, the world begins to lose its ability to break you. Chapter 2. Why most people never recover once they break. Most people don't fail because life hits them too hard. They fail because they never recover properly after the hit. There is a moment, often quiet, often invisible, when something inside a person breaks. It's not always dramatic. No collapse, no public failure. Sometimes it's just one disappointment too many. One effort that didn't pay off. One rejection that stayed longer than expected, and from that moment on, everything changes. They still show up. They still function, but they no longer trust themselves the same way. This is where the real damage begins. When people break, they don't usually fall apart on the outside. They fracture internally. Their confidence becomes conditional. Their effort becomes cautious. Their ambition becomes smaller, quieter, safer, and they stop playing to win. They start playing not to get hurt again. Most people think recovery means feeling better. But emotional relief is not recovery. It's often just avoidance wearing a softer face. Real recovery is structural. It's about how you rebuild the way you think, respond, and act after pressure exposes your limits. And this is where most people fail. After a setback, they turn inward, but not in a useful way. They replay the moment. They criticize themselves. They ask why they weren't enough. That internal dialogue becomes toxic, not loud, not dramatic, just constant. Every future challenge is filtered through doubt. Every decision feels heavier. Every risk feels more dangerous. And slowly their identity shifts. They no longer see themselves as capable of enduring. And they see themselves as someone who doesn't handle pressure well, someone who always gets overwhelmed, someone who just isn't built for this. That belief is far more destructive than the original failure. Because once you identify as fragile, you unconsciously protect that identity. You avoid difficulty. You lower expectations. You rationalize quitting early and the world reinforces it. Life doesn't reward people who hesitate after breaking. It rewards people who can reset quickly. Recovery is not about confidence returning on its own. Confidence rarely comes back naturally. Recovery is about regaining control. Control over your thoughts, control over your behavior, control over how much meaning you assign to what happened. People who recover quickly don't pretend the pain didn't happen. They acknowledge it, then contain it. They don't let one moment redefine their entire self-image. They ask different questions, not what's wrong with me, but what does this require of me now? That shift matters because when you frame setbacks as information instead of judgment, you stop attacking yourself and start adjusting your approach. Most people never do this. They internalize failure as a verdict. They let it shape their story. I'm not cut out for this. I always mess things up. I knew this wouldn't work. Those sentences feel honest, but they are lazy conclusions drawn from pain. And pain is a terrible decision maker. The truth is breaking is not the end. It's exposure. It shows you where you lack structure, where emotion overrides discipline, where preparation was missing, but only if you look at it objectively. Unrecovered people turn setbacks into identity. Recovered people turn setbacks into instruction. This is the critical difference. Recovered people rebuild themselves deliberately. They don't wait to feel strong again. They act while strength is low. They keep routines small but consistent. They reestablish standards even when confidence is shaky. They prove to themselves through action that they are still in control. Control comes before confidence always. When you move according to standards instead of emotions, your nervous system relearns stability. When you show up despite discomfort, your mind updates its beliefs. You stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing yourself as someone who can recover. That belief compounds. Most people never experience this because they try to heal emotionally before they act. But waiting to feel ready keeps you stuck. Recovery is not a feeling. It's a process of re-engagement. You don't rebuild trust in yourself by thinking. You rebuild it by keeping promises when it's inconvenient. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Recovery forces you to face the exact situations you'd rather avoid. It asks you to move forward without reassurance. It demands patience when progress feels slow. That's why so few people do it properly. They want relief, not resilience. They want reassurance, not responsibility. But resilience is built by confronting what broke you with better structure, better responses, and a stronger internal standard. This doesn't mean pretending setbacks don't hurt. It means refusing to let hurt become an excuse for collapse. Recovered people still feel pain. They just don't let it dictate their next move. They don't dramatize their suffering. They don't wear it as proof of depth. They treat it as part of the process. And over time, something powerful happens. They stop fearing breaking, not because they enjoy pain, but because they trust their ability to recover. That trust changes everything. When you are no longer afraid of collapse, you stop living cautiously. You stop shrinking your goals. You stop avoiding pressure. You become harder to defeat. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing defines you permanently. Most people never recover once they break because they confuse pain with meaning. They think suffering says something final about who they are. It doesn't. It only reveals what still needs to be built. And once you understand that, breaking stops being the end of your strength and becomes the beginning of it. Chapter 3. Emotional control is the core of being unbreakable. Most people believe their biggest problem is life itself. The pressure, the chaos, the unpredictability. But in reality, what breaks them is not what happens on the outside. It's what happens inside them when pressure appears. Emotions are powerful. They are fast. They are convincing. And if they are left unchecked, they will quietly take control of your behavior. This is where unbreakability is either built or lost. The world does not break people by force. It breaks them by provoking emotional reactions they never learned how to manage. Anger that leads to impulsive decisions. Fear that leads to hesitation. Frustration that leads to quitting too early. Disappointment that turns into self-doubt. None of these emotions are wrong. They are human, but allowing them to dictate your actions is what makes you fragile. Most people confuse emotional control with emotional suppression. They think being strong means feeling nothing. That's not control. That's avoidance. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They accumulate and eventually they explode. Often at the worst possible moment. True emotional control is different. It means you feel what you feel, but you don't let that feeling decide what you do next. You create a gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, strength lives. Unbreakable people are not karma by nature. They are calmer by training. They have practiced not reacting immediately. They have practiced staying still when emotions demand movement. They have practiced delaying expressions until clarity returns. This is a skill, and like any skill, and it must be built deliberately. When pressure hits, the untrained mind looks for relief. It wants to vent. It wants to escape. It wants to do something, anything, to reduce discomfort. But relief is short-term, and it often creates long-term damage. Unbreakable people choose regulation over relief. They slow themselves down when everything feels urgent. They breathe when their instincts say they react. They observe their internal state instead of obeying it. This is not passive. It is disciplined. Think about how many decisions are made in emotional states. Words spoken that cannot be taken back. Actions taken that complicate everything. Opportunities lost because fear was louder than reason. Emotional control is what prevents one bad moment from turning into a bad direction. It allows you to respond instead of react, to choose instead of explode, to endure discomfort without self-sabotage. And this matters because the world will test you emotionally far more often than it will test you physically. You will be ignored. You will be underestimated. You will be disrespected. You will be disappointed. Not once, repeatedly. If every one of those moments hijacks your behavior, you will constantly be rebuilding from self-inflicted damage. The unbreakable person understands this. They accept that emotions are temporary signals, not commands. Feeling discouraged does not mean stop. Feeling angry does not mean attack. Feeling afraid does not mean retreat. These feelings are information, not instructions. Emotional control is the ability to receive that information without surrendering authority. Authority over your actions, authority over your standards, and the authority to stay aligned with your long-term goals, even when your short-term emotions protest. This is where inner strength is forged. Not in moments of ease, but in moments where acting emotionally would feel justified, and you still don't do it. This level of control does not happen automatically. It is built through repetition. You practice pausing before responding. You practice sitting with discomfort without numbing it. You practice choosing restraint when reaction feels easier. At first, it felt unnatural, even uncomfortable. But over time, something shifts. You stop being surprised by your emotions. You stop fearing them. You stop being controlled by them. You begin to trust yourself under pressure. And that trust is everything. Because once you trust your ability to stay composed, you no longer fear difficult conversations. You no longer fear setbacks. You no longer fear moments that would previously overwhelm you. You know you can handle yourself. Most people never develop this because emotional reaction is socially normalized. People vent publicly. They react online. They justify outbursts as authenticity. But expression without control is not strength. It is exposure. Unbreakable people are selective. They choose when to express themselves. They choose how much to reveal. They choose when silence is more powerful than speech. They understand that calm is not weakness. Calm is leverage. A calm mind sees options. An emotional mind sees threats. A calm presence stabilizes others. An emotional presence spreads chaos. The world responds differently to people who remain composed under pressure. They are trusted more, respected more, taken seriously more often, not because they dominate, but because they don't collapse. This is why emotional control is the core of being unbreakable. You can have discipline, you can have ambition, you can have intelligence, but without emotional regulation, all of it is vulnerable. One bad moment can undo months of effort. The unbreakable person protects their progress by mastering their inner state. They don't try to eliminate emotion. They learn to carry it without letting it spill everywhere. And as this control strengthens, something profound happens. Life still applies pressure, but it no longer knocks you off balance. You feel stress, but you don't panic. You feel anger, but you don't lash out. As you feel fear, but you still move forward. That is real power, not dominance over others, but command over yourself. And once you develop that command, the world loses one of its most effective tools against you because it can no longer break you by pulling your emotional strings. Chapter 4. Discipline turns pain into structure. Pain is unavoidable. Structure is optional. This is where most people make a fatal mistake. They assume pain is the problem. They believe if they could just remove discomfort, pressure, or stress, everything would fall into place. But pain is not what breaks people. Lack of structure is pain. Without structure creates chaos. Pain with structure creates strength. The world delivers pressure consistently. Deadlines, expectations, fatigue, rejection, responsibility. These forces don't disappear when you're struggling. They don't pause to see how you feel. They don't soften because you've had a hard week. And without discipline, pain spreads. It leaks into your decisions. It distorts your thinking. It turns small problems into overwhelming ones. Discipline is what contains pain. Not by eliminating it, but by giving it boundaries. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's about intensity, about waking up early, about forcing yourself to do extreme things. That's not discipline. That's the motivation for wearing a costume. Real discipline is quieter. It's doing the right thing when your emotions disagree. It's maintaining standards when energy is low. It's continuing forward motion without needing excitement or encouragement. Discipline turns pain into something usable. Without discipline, pain feels random and personal. With discipline, pain becomes predictable and manageable. This distinction matters. When pain feels random, it feels threatening. When pain feels structured, it feels temporary. The disciplined person doesn't ask, "How do I feel today?" They ask, "So, what needs to be done today?" That question alone changes everything. Because feelings fluctuate, circumstances shift, motivation rises and falls, but standards remain. Discipline is a precision. It removes negotiation from moments of weakness. The unstructured mind negotiates constantly. Maybe later, not today. I deserve a break. And sometimes those thoughts sound reasonable, even compassionate. But repeated negotiation erodes identity. Each compromise sends a signal. I am someone who bends under pressure. Discipline sends the opposite message. I show up regardless. That message compounds. Every disciplined action strengthens trust in yourself. Every kept promise reinforces stability. Every completed task adds weight to your character. And this is how discipline turns pain into structure. Pain becomes the environment you operate in, not the force that controls you. Discipline does not make life easier. It makes life clearer. You know what you do when you're tired. You know how you respond when things go wrong. You know which behaviors are non-negotiable. That clarity removes panic. Most people panic because they don't know who they are under pressure. They haven't practiced it. Discipline is practice. It's repetition under imperfect conditions. You don't wait for the perfect mood. You don't wait for clarity to arrive. You move even when movement feels heavy. Over time, your nervous system adapts. What once felt overwhelming becomes familiar. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. Not because pain decreased, but because your capacity increased. This is the hidden gift of discipline. It expands what you can endure without breaking. Without discipline, every setback feels like a personal failure. With discipline, setbacks are just part of the process. You don't dramatize them. You don't internalize them. You adjust and continue. Discipline creates rhythm, and the rhythm is stabilizing. When life feels chaotic, routines anchor you. When emotions fluctuate, habits ground you. When motivation disappears, structure carries you forward. The unbreakable person understands this. They don't chase motivation. They don't rely on inspiration. They build systems that function even on bad days. This is why discipline is so misunderstood. It looks boring from the outside. It lacks drama. It doesn't make good stories. But it builds something far more valuable than excitement. It builds reliability. Nemen reliability is resilience in action. When you are reliable to yourself, you stop fearing difficult periods. You trust that you will do what needs to be done even when it's uncomfortable. That trust removes fear. Fear of burnout, fear of failure, fear of losing control. Discipline doesn't eliminate stress. It prevents stress from overwhelming you. It creates order where chaos would otherwise spread. This is also why discipline feels restrictive at first. It limits options. It demands consistency. It requires saying no to distractions, to excuses, to emotional impulses. But that restriction creates freedom. Freedom from emotional volatility. Freedom from constant self-negotiation. Freedom from being at the mercy of your own moods. The disciplined person is not rigid. They are grounded. They don't overreact to pain. They don't collapse when things go wrong. They don't need life to feel good to function well. They have structure. And structure holds when motivation doesn't. This is what separates people who endure from people who break. Not talent. Not intelligence. Not luck. Structure. Discipline turns pain into a training ground instead of a threat. It transforms suffering into information, discomfort into endurance, pressure into progress. Without discipline, pain asks, how much can you take? With discipline, pain answers, you can take more than you thought. And that realization changes how you face the world. You stop avoiding difficulty. You stop fearing discomfort. You stop running from pressure because you know you are built to handle it. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but consistently is. And consistency is what makes you unbreakable. When pain arrives, as it always does, it no longer finds chaos. It finds structure. And the structure does not collapse easily. Chapter 5. Stop expecting fairness from life. One of the fastest ways to break yourself is to expect life to be fair. Fairness feels comforting. It feels moral. It feels reasonable, but it is also one of the most dangerous expectations you can carry. Because the moment you believe life should reward effort, honesty, or good intentions, you begin handing your emotional stability over to forces you cannot control. And life does not honor that contract. It never has. Effort is not always rewarded. Hard work is not always recognized. Good people are not always protected. Bad outcomes do not wait for bad intentions. This is not pessimism. It is reality. Most people are not broken by hardship itself. They are broken by the shock of discovering that hardship is often undeserved. They ask, why me? I did everything right. This isn't fair. None in that belief more than the event destroys their resilience. Fairness creates entitlement. Entitlement creates resentment, and resentment quietly drains strength. When you expect fairness, every setback feels personal. Every obstacle feels like an injustice. Every loss feels like proof that the world is against you. That mindset does not make you principled. It makes you fragile. Unbreakable people see the world differently. They do not expect fairness. They expect reality. They understand that life operates on cause and effect, not moral balance. They don't waste energy asking whether something is fair. They ask whether it is real. And that shift is liberating, because once you stop demanding fairness, you stop being emotionally hostage to outcomes. You no longer collapse when effort goes unnoticed. You no longer spiral when things don't work out. You no longer feel betrayed by life itself. You adapt. This does not mean becoming cynical or cold. It means becoming grounded. There is a critical difference. Cynical people disengage. Grounded people take responsibility. Grounded people understand that fairness is not a prerequisite for action. They do the work anyway. They show up anyway. They maintain standards even when no one rewards them. This is where real strength is built. Expecting fairness makes you dependent on external validation. Rejecting that expectation returns control to you. When you stop asking life to treat you well, you stop giving it permission to emotionally destabilize you. You become less reactive, less bitter, less surprised by adversity, and more focused. Most people cling to fairness because it gives them comfort. It allows them to believe outcomes reflect worth. But that belief is dangerous. If success means you're valuable, then failure must mean you're not. That is how people collapse internally. Unbreakable people detach their identity from outcomes. They understand that outcomes are influenced by timing, context, other people, and chance. Their worth is not negotiated by results. This is why they recover faster. They don't interpret failure as condemnation. They interpret it as data. They don't take life's indifference personally. They accept it and move accordingly. And once you accept that life is not fair, you gain something far more powerful than comfort. You gain clarity. Clarity about what you can control. Clarity about what you can't. Clarity about where your energy should go. You stop trying to win sympathy from the universe. You stop wasting time wishing things were different. You focus on action. This shift alone reduces emotional suffering dramatically. Not because life improves overnight, but because resistance disappears. You stop fighting reality. And fighting reality is exhausting. The unbreakable person does not need life to be kind to function well. They operate from internal standards, not external justice. They measure themselves by effort, consistency, and integrity, not by applause or outcomes. That internal scoreboard is what keeps them stable. Fairness, when expected, makes people passive. They wait. They hope. They assume someone will notice. Unbreakable people don't wait. They take responsibility even when circumstances are unfair. They adjust their strategy instead of complaining. They move forward even when acknowledgement never comes. This is not a submission. It is sovereignty. You reclaim power the moment you stop asking the world to validate you. And paradoxically, this mindset often leads to better results. Because when you are no longer emotionally entangled with fairness, you can see opportunities more clearly. You take smarter risks. You make calmer decisions. You endure longer. Life may not be fair, but it is responsive. It responds to persistence. It responds to discipline. It responds to people who don't collapse under indifference. Expecting fairness weakens you because it keeps you dependent. Rejecting that expectation strengthens you because it forces maturity. Maturity is accepting that life owes you nothing, and choosing to build anyway. This acceptance is not depressing. It is empowering. You stop being shocked by adversity. You stop being offended by difficulty. You stop being emotionally derailed by outcomes you cannot control. You become steady, and steadiness is rare. Most people are thrown off balance by unmet expectations. Unbreakable people remove those expectations entirely. They replace them with preparation, responsibility, and resolve. They don't say this shouldn't be happening. They say this is happening. What now? That question keeps them moving. The world cannot break you as easily when you no longer expect it to play fair, because fairness was never the shield. Acceptance was. And then once you accept reality as it is, not as you wish it to be, you stop wasting strength on resentment. You redirect it into action. That is when you become truly difficult to defeat. Not because life treats you better, but because unfairness no longer has the power to destabilize you. And that is a quiet, unshakable form of strength. Chapter 6. Build an identity that doesn't collapse. Most people believe their problems come from circumstances, bad luck, unfair treatment, difficult environments. But the real point of collapse usually happens deeper than that. It happens at the level of identity. When pressure rises, people don't fall to the level of their goals. They fall to the level of how they see themselves. If your identity is fragile, your life will be fragile. No matter how talented or motivated you are, many people unknowingly build their identity on unstable ground. They tie their sense of worth to outcomes, to success, to approval, to momentum. When I'm winning, I'm confident. When things are going well, I feel strong. When people recognize me, I feel valuable. That kind of identity works until it doesn't. The moment progress slows, confidence disappears. The moment failure appears, self-respect collapses. The moment external validation fades, motivation dies. This is why so many people fall apart after setbacks. They didn't just lose a result. They lost who they thought they were. An unbreakable person builds an GT, and GT, and GT, and GT, identity differently. They do not anchor it to outcomes. They anchor it to behavior. They don't say, I am confident when things go well. They say, I'm someone who shows up regardless of conditions. That distinction is everything. Outcomes fluctuate. Behavior is controllable. When identity is built on behavior, it doesn't collapse under pressure. You may fail, but you don't lose yourself. You may struggle, but you don't question your worth. You may slow down, but you don't stop. This is how stability is created. Unstable identities are reactive. They rise with praise and they fall with criticism. They shrink under comparison. Stable identities are grounded. They are not dependent on mood. They are not negotiated under stress. They do not disappear when things go wrong. The unbreakable person knows exactly who they are, especially on bad days. They are the person who keeps their word. The person who finishes what they start. The person who does not abandon standards when it's inconvenient. This identity is earned, not declared. You don't convince yourself you are disciplined. You prove it through repetition. You don't think your way into resilience. You act your way into it. Every time you keep a promise to yourself when it would be easier not to, you add weight to your identity. Every time you show up tired, discouraged, nor unmotivated, and still do the work, you reinforce a self-image that does not collapse. This process is slow, and that's why most people avoid it. They want an identity that feels good immediately. They want to feel confident without earning stability. But confidence without foundation is fragile. The world doesn't break people who know who they are. It breaks people who become uncertain of themselves the moment conditions change. That uncertainty creates hesitation. Hesitation creates inconsistency. Inconsistency erodes self-rust. Once self-rust is gone, everything feels heavier, decisions become harder, challenges feel larger, pressure feels personal. The unbreakable person protects self-rust at all costs. They do this by living in alignment with clear internal rules. It rules like I do what I say I will do. I don't quit when things get uncomfortable. I don't negotiate with excuses. I return to discipline even after failure. These rules form the backbone of identity. They are not dramatic. They are not impressive to others. But they are powerful. Because when identity is clear, external chaos loses influence. You don't ask, how do I feel about this today? You ask, what would someone like me do now? That question eliminates emotional confusion. It simplifies decisions. It stabilizes behavior. It prevents collapse. This is why identity-based strength lasts longer than motivation. Motivation is emotional. Identity is structural. Motivation rises and falls. Identity holds. People who rely on motivation constantly feel like they're starting over. People who rely on identity keep moving even slowly without losing direction. An identity that doesn't collapse is built through consistency under pressure. Not grand achievements, not perfect streaks, but small repeated acts of integrity. Doing the task you committed to even when no one knows. Maintaining standards even when results are disappointing. Returning to structure even after you slip. Every return strengthens NGT, identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You see yourself as someone who follows through. That shift changes how you face the world. Pressure no longer threatens your sense of self. Failure no longer defines you. Criticism no longer destabilizes you because your identity is not up for negotiation. This does not make you rigid or arrogant. It makes you grounded, knows you are flexible in strategy but firm in standards. You can adjust tactics without questioning who you are. You can lose without losing yourself. This is why identity is the hidden core of unbreakability. When identity collapses, everything collapses with it. When identity holds, everything else can be rebuilt. The world can take your results. It can take your comfort. It can take your momentum, but it cannot break you if it cannot make you doubt who you are. Most people are one setback away from identity collapse because they built their sense of self on unstable ground. Unbreakable people build slowly, deliberately, and quietly. They don't chase validation. They don't rely on feeling strong. They rely on being consistent. And over time, that consistency hardens into something unshakable. An identity that does not collapse when things go wrong. And an identity that remains intact when progress is slow. An identity that stands firm when the world applies pressure. That is what makes you resilient. Not the absence of failure, but the presence of a self that survives it. And once you build that kind of identity, the world loses one of its greatest weapons against you. Because it can no longer break you by taking things away. You remain. Chapter 7. Solitude, Silence, and Inner Strength. Most people are not broken by hardship alone. They are broken by noise. Constant noise, constant input, constant comparison. The modern world does not give you space to become strong. It fills every quiet moment with distraction, opinion, and stimulation. And without realizing it, most people become dependent on that noise. They feel uneasy in silence. Restless when alone, uncomfortable when there is nothing to consume. That discomfort is not accidental. Silence exposes what distraction hides. It reveals unresolved thoughts, unprocessed emotions, unexamined fears. And instead of learning to face those things, most people avoid them. They scroll, they talk, they stay busy. But avoidance does not make you stronger. It makes you dependent. Inner strength is built in solitude. Not loneliness and not isolation driven by bitterness, but deliberate solitude. The kind you choose. The kind where you sit with your thoughts without immediately escaping them. The kind where you are not performing for anyone. The kind where you are not seeking approval, reaction or validation. This is where resilience is forged. Unbreakable people are comfortable being alone. Not because they don't value others, but because they do not need constant external reinforcement to feel stable. They can think without distraction. They can observe their emotions without panic. They can hear uncomfortable truths without numbing themselves. This ability is rare, and rarity is power. Most people outsource their sense of self to the external world. They check how they feel based on feedback. They measure worth through comparison. They regulate emotion through consumption. When approval rises, they feel good. When attention fades, they feel empty. That is not strength. That is dependence. To silence breaks that dependency. In silence, there is no audience, no immediate reward, no emotional escape. Only you and your inner state. At first, this feels unsettling. Thoughts become louder, emotions surface, discomfort increases. Most people interpret this as something being wrong. It isn't. It means the noise is gone. And now you can finally hear yourself. This is where inner strength begins. Not in suppressing thoughts, but in observing them. Not in fighting emotions, but in allowing them without acting on them. Silence teaches emotional regulation naturally. When there is nothing to distract you, you are forced to learn how to sit with discomfort. And sitting with discomfort without collapsing is a core trait of unbreakable people. They do not run from their inner world. They train within it. Solitude gives you perspective. When you are constantly surrounded by opinions, your thinking becomes reactive. You adopt beliefs without examining them. You absorb fears that are not yours. You chase goals that don't align with who you are. Solitude interrupts that process. It gives you space to ask honest questions. What do I actually want? What matters to me without influence? What am I avoiding by staying busy? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Unbreakable people ask them anyway. They understand that clarity does not come from more information. It comes from fewer distractions. Silence also builds emotional independence. When you stop constantly seeking reassurance, you develop the ability to reassure yourself. You learn to self-regulate, to self-correct, to self-motivate. This does not make you cold or distant. It makes you stable. You no longer panic when others are unavailable. You no longer feel lost without external input. You no longer need immediate validation to function. Your emotional baseline becomes internal. That is inner strength. Most people fear solitude because it removes the illusion of progress. Distraction feels productive. Silence feels empty. But silence is not empty. It is preparatory. It clears the mental clutter that weakens decision. It restores attention. It sharpens self-awareness. Unbreakable people use solitude intentionally. They schedule it. They protect it. They treat it as training. Not every day, not for long periods, but consistently. Even short periods of intentional silence build capacity. Capacity to think clearly under pressure. Capacity to stay calm without stimulation. Capacity to endure discomfort without escaping. This capacity compounds when life becomes loud and demanding. The person trained in silence remains composed. They are not overwhelmed by urgency. They are not pulled apart by competing demands. They are not easily shaken by chaos because chaos feels familiar. They have already faced disorder internally. Silence also removes the need to perform. Most people live as if they are constantly being watched. They curate. They impress. They seek approval. This performance creates anxiety. In solitude, there is nothing to prove, no image to maintain, no reaction to manage. This freedom allows honesty, and honesty strengthens identity. You stop pretending. You stop exaggerating. You stop hiding behind distraction. You see yourself clearly, and clarity builds resilience. An unexamined inner world is a liability because under pressure unresolved thoughts surface uncontrollably. Solitude resolves that. It gives you familiarity with your inner patterns. You know what fear feels like before it escalates. You recognize anger before it drives behavior. You notice discouragement without obeying it. This self-knowledge prevents collapse. You're not surprised by yourself. Most people break under pressure because they meet themselves for the first time in chaos. Unbreakable people have already met themselves in silence. They have already learned how they react. They have already practiced restraint. They have already built trust in their ability to remain steady. That trust carries into every area of life, work, relationships, adversity. When you are comfortable in solitude, you are no longer dependent on external conditions to feel whole. You can be alone without feeling empty. You can be quiet without feeling lost. You can be still without feeling weak. And that is power. Because the world cannot easily manipulate someone who does not need constant stimulation, approval or reassurance. Silence removes hooks. Solitude strengthens roots. And roots unseen, quiet, deeper what keep a person standing when everything above the surface is shaking. This is why solitude and silence are not escapes. They are training grounds. And those who train there develop a kind of inner strength that the world struggles to break. Chapter 8. Becoming unbreakable is a daily decision. Most people believe strength is something you arrive at. A finish line. A final version of yourself. A moment where life no longer shakes you. That moment never comes. Unbreakability is not a destination. It is a decision made daily. And this is where many people fail. They assume once they've suffered enough, learned enough, or grown enough, life will finally ease up. But life does not test you once. It tests you continuously in different forms at different levels, in different seasons. So the question is not how to become unbreakable once. The question is how to remain unbreakable over time. The answer is simple but not easy. You decide who you are every day. On days when you feel strong, that decision feels effortless. On days when you feel tired, discouraged, or indifferent, and that decision feels heavy. Those days matter more because strength is not proven when everything is aligned. It is proven when nothing is. Every day, life presents small moments that test your standards. Moments where it would be easier to delay, easier to rationalize, easier to lower the bar just slightly. Most people think these moments are insignificant. They are not. These moments are where identity is either reinforced or weakened. You don't become breakable overnight. You become breakable through small compromises repeated over time. And the same is true for resilience. Unbreakable people do not rely on intensity. They rely on consistency. They understand that showing up imperfectly is more powerful than waiting to feel ready. They don't ask themselves, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "What does my standard require today?" That question anchors them. Because feelings change, circumstances shift, but standards provide direction when clarity is absent. The unbreakable person is not someone who never struggles. They struggle, they doubt, they get tired, but they do not abandon themselves in those moments. They continue to act in alignment with who they've chosen to be. That alignment builds momentum. Momentum does not come from motivation. It comes from keeping promises, especially small ones. Getting up when you said you would. Completing the task you committed to. Maintaining composure when reacting would feel justified. These actions seem ordinary. They're not. They are the building blocks of reliability. And reliability creates self-trust. When you trust yourself, pressure loses its ability to destabilize you. You may feel stress, but you don't panic. You may feel doubt, but you don't freeze. You may feel discomfort, but you don't collapse. You know you will do what needs to be done. That certainty is rare. Most people live in negotiation with themselves. They debate effort. They argue with discipline. They delay responsibility. This internal conflict drains energy. Unbreakable people remove that conflict. They decide in advance how they behave and then they follow through. Not perfectly but consistently. Consistency is forgiving. It allows mistakes without collapse. It allows setbacks without identity loss. If you miss a day, you return the next. If you fail, you adjust and continue. You do not dramatize the deviation. You correct it. This ability to return quickly is what separates resilient people from fragile ones. A fragile people turn mistakes into excuses. Unbreakable people turn mistakes into feedback. They do not punish themselves. They do not spiral. They course correct. That calm correction is strength. Becoming unbreakable also means accepting that progress is often invisible. There will be long periods where it feels like nothing is changing. No recognition, no clear reward, no external confirmation. These periods test resolve. Most people quit here, not because the work is too hard, but because the feedback is absent. Unbreakable people continue anyway. They understand that growth compounds quietly before it becomes visible. They trust the process because they trust themselves. This trust is built daily, not through grand gestures, but through repeated alignment between intention and action. Every day you choose discipline over impulse. You strengthen that trust. Every day you choose composure over reaction. You reinforce that identity. Every day you choose responsibility over comfort. You deepen resilience. And over time, something changes. Life still applies pressure, but you no longer interpret it as a threat. Pressure becomes familiar, manageable, expected. You stop asking, "Why is this happening?" You start asking, "What does this require of me?" That question keeps you forward-facing. Unbreakable people are not obsessed with outcomes. They are committed to process. They know that if they continue making the right decisions daily, results will eventually follow. And if results don't follow immediately, they still win because they did not abandon their standards. This mindset removes desperation. You stop forcing timelines. You stop chasing shortcuts. You stop measuring your worth by speed. You focus on direction. Are you moving forward? Are you staying aligned? Are you responding with discipline instead of emotion? If the answer is yes, you are winning, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Becoming unbreakable also requires humility. The humility to accept that you will never be finished. That strength requires maintenance. That neglect leads to decay. Unbreakable people do not assume immunity. They continue training. They continue refining. They continue choosing discipline even after progress is made. They understand that what built them must continue to sustain them. There is no autopilot, but there is confidence in that because when strength is a daily practice, it does not depend on circumstances. You carry it with you in difficult conversations, in uncertain seasons, in moments of isolation or pressure. You are not searching for strength. You are practicing it, and slowly, almost without noticing, you become someone life struggles to break. Not because you avoid hardship, but because you meet it with structure, control, and resolve. Every day you are given a choice to react or respond to lower standards, or uphold them, to abandon yourself or stay aligned. These choices shape you not all at once but cumulatively. And one day you realize something important. Life still challenges you, but it no longer shakes your foundation. You are steady, grounded, reliable. Not because the world changed, but because you did. That becoming unbreakable was never about one defining moment. It was about choosing again and again to be someone who does not collapse. And that choice made daily is what turns strength into something permanent. By now, one truth should be clear. The world was never meant to protect you. It applies pressure without warning. It tests you when you are tired. It challenges you when you least feel ready. And it does this not once but repeatedly. If you were looking for comfort, reassurance, or easy answers, this audiobook was never meant for that. It was meant to prepare you. Because the difference between people who are broken by life and those who endure is not luck, talent, or intelligence. It is structure. It is control. It is identity. It is daily choice. You have seen how the unprepared are slowly worn down. How unrecovered breaks turn into permanent self-doubt. How uncontrolled emotions sabotage progress. How discipline transforms pain into something usable. How expecting fairness weakens resilience. Or how fragile identities collapse under pressure. How silence and solitude build inner strength. And how becoming unbreakable is never a single moment but a repeated decision. None of this is dramatic. None of this is glamorous. And that is exactly why it works. Real strength is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not need validation. It is revealed only when pressure arrives and you remain standing. Being unbreakable does not mean life stops hurting. It means pain no longer dictates who you become. You will still feel stress. You will still feel fear. You will still face disappointment. But you will no longer collapse internally. You will respond instead of react. You will adjust instead of quit. You will return to your standards instead of abandoning them. That is power. Not power over others, but command over yourself. As in that kind of power compounds. Each time you hold your ground, you reinforce trust in yourself. Each time you choose discipline over impulse, you strengthen your identity. Each time you endure without bitterness, you harden your core. Over time, and GT, and GT, and GT, and GT, life notices, not because it becomes kinder, but because you become harder to destabilize. The world stops breaking you. Not when challenges disappear, but when challenges no longer control you. That is the goal, not comfort, not ease, not constant happiness. Stability. The kind that allows you to move forward even when conditions are imperfect. The kind that allows you to remain grounded when others panic. The kind that allows you to keep going when motivation fades. You're not meant to be fragile. You're meant to be resilient. And resilience is built, not wished for. So take what you've heard here and apply it. Choose one standard and make it non-negotiable. Choose one habit and keep it even on bad days. Choose composure when reaction feels justified. Choose responsibility when excuses feel easier. Do not try to change everything at once. Strength is not built through intensity. It is built through consistency. And remember this, the world will continue to test you. That will not change, but you can decide every day whether those tests weaken you or reinforce you. If this audiobook helped you see yourself more clearly, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with one person you care about. Someone who may be struggling. Someone who needs clarity, strength, and direction right now.